Poor girl meets a guy at a wedding reception. 1 week later, he reveals he is a billionaire heir and makes her a proposal. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as Emily skillfully balanced 3 cups on her tray. Her fingers were already calloused after 2 years working at the Blooming Day Cafe, a modest establishment in the heart of the city. At 20 years old, she had become one of the quickest waitresses around, though this wasn't exactly the life she'd once dreamed for herself. "Table 7, cappuccino with extra cinnamon," her co-worker Sophie called out from the kitchen. Emily straightened her rumpled apron and ran a hand through her unruly brown hair that insisted on slipping out of the makeshift bun. The motion made her mind drift to a distant memory, her mother fixing her hair for her first day of school, promising that one day she would become a great artist. A bittersweet smile crossed her lips. Reality had other plans. After the accident that took her parents when she was only 12, Emily was raised by Aunt Margaret, a practical woman who believed more in paying bills than in artistic dreams. Her dance lessons, once her greatest joy, were replaced by part-time jobs and practical studies. "Emily," Marcus's voice brought her back to the present. He waved an envelope in his hands, his usually stern face showing a rare smile. "I need to talk to you." She finished delivering the orders and approached the counter, curious. Marcus rarely smiled, and when he did, it usually meant good news, or at least news that benefited the cafe. "Remember that customer, the event organizer who always orders our special almond coffee?" Marcus began, drumming his fingers on the envelope. "He was impressed with your service. He's organizing a wedding at Crystal Manor next month and needs extra waitresses. The pay is 3 times what you earn here per night." Emily's heart raced. Crystal Manor was the most luxurious event venue in the city. She had passed by its golden doors countless times, wondering what it would be like inside. Can I think about it?" she asked, her voice betraying the mix of excitement and apprehension she felt. Marcus frowned. "You have until tomorrow. You have." "They need an answer." That night, in the small apartment she shared, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, looking at the shoebox she kept underneath it. Inside were her long, unused ballet slippers, along with old photos and performance programs she used to collect. She picked up one specific photo, her at 10 years old, at her first ballet recital. Her eyes sparkled with happiness as her parents hugged her proudly. The Municipal Theatre, where the performance had been held, was only a few blocks from Crystal Manor. Her fingers brushed against the dusty slippers. How long had it been since she truly danced? Not those small spins alone in her bedroom, but really danced with purpose and passion. The invitation to work at the wedding felt like cruel irony. She'd be at the place of her dreams, sure, but on the wrong side of the hall, not as an artist, but as just another anonymous waitress serving champagne to the guests. Still, something inside her stirred at the possibility. Maybe it was just the chance to experience a glimpse of that world she had dreamed of belonging to. Or maybe it was something else, something she couldn't quite define yet. The next morning, Emily woke up before her alarm, her hands slightly sweaty as she got ready for work. She had spent a good part of the night rehearsing different scenarios in her mind, weighing the pros and cons. "You look like you didn't sleep," Sophie commented as soon as Emily arrived at the cafe. "It's about the wedding invitation, isn't it?" Emily nodded, starting to line up the cups for the day. "I'm going to accept," she said finally, surprising even herself with the confidence in her voice. Sophie grinned, hugging her around the shoulders. "I knew you would. So tell me, have you decided what you'll wear? It has to be something elegant, but practical. And your hair. We could do a more sophisticated style." While her friend chatted excitedly about preparations, Emily felt that old familiar mix of anxiety and hope swell in her chest. It was the same feeling she had before her childhood dance performances, a racing heart, sweaty palms, and an indescribable sense that something important was about to happen. Marcus showed up soon afterward, and she gave him her answer. As he made the call to confirm her participation, Emily watched the street through the cafe window. Across the way, she could see the top of Crystal Manor sparkling in the morning sun. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to dream again, not about what could have been, but about what still might be. After all, sometimes the greatest moments of transformation begin in the most unexpected places. And who knows, maybe this timely invitation was more than just an extra gig. Perhaps it was the start of something much bigger. Crystal Manor was even more impressive inside than Emily had imagined. Standing at the staff entrance in the back, she tried to steady her breathing as she took in every detail around her. The vaulted ceiling, with its meticulously restored frescoes, seemed to touch the sky. Crystal chandeliers cascaded from above like waterfalls frozen in time, their thousands of facets shining under the golden afternoon light. "All servers, attention please." The authoritative voice of Mrs. Davies, the event coordinator, cut through her daydreams. "The cocktail hour will start in exactly 45 minutes. Remember, discretion, elegance, and efficiency are our watchwords." Emily adjusted the black and white uniform they'd provided, much more elegant than her usual cafe apron. Sophie had helped alter the skirt the night before, and her hair was neatly pulled back into a low bun, thanks to Emma and her knack for hairpins from long shifts at the hospital. The main hall was a testament to the opulence of the Belle Époque, with walls dressed in damask silk wallpaper and gilded frames around mirrors that seemed to multiply the space infinitely. Round tables seating 10 each were arranged in a perfect circular pattern around a central dance floor, their pristine white tablecloths draping precisely to the polished marble floor. The floral arrangements were genuine living sculptures, white orchids and champagne-hued roses intertwined in compositions that probably cost more than her monthly salary. The perfume of the flowers mingled with the sandalwood aroma from the strategically placed candles. "Miss Carter," Mrs. Davies called out, checking her clipboard, "you'll be in charge of Section 3 near the grand piano. Start serving champagne as soon as the first guests arrive." Emily nodded, memorizing her station. The black Steinway piano sat on a small raised platform where an orchestra would play later. Her fingers tingled at the memory of past music lessons, another luxury that had vanished after the accident. The first guests started arriving punctually at 6. Women in designer gowns that cost more than an average car, and men in custom-tailored tuxedos moved around the hall like characters from a period film. Emily wove among them like an efficient shadow, offering flutes of Cristal champagne with a grace she owed to her years of ballet practice. It was during one of these rounds that the incident occurred. She was serving a new tray of drinks when a guest's sudden movement caused the tray to wobble. For one terrible moment, time seemed to slow as she watched the glasses begin to tilt. "Watch out!" a male voice rang out beside her, and firm hands appeared from nowhere, stabilizing the tray before catastrophe struck. Only a few drops of champagne splashed onto the marble floor. Thank you," Emily whispered, looking up at her rescuer. The young man before her couldn't be older than 23, but there was something about his posture that suggested a maturity beyond his years. His green eyes twinkled with amusement, and a crooked smile played on his lips. "Anthony," he introduced quietly, helping her reposition the flutes. "And no need to thank me. Let's call it my good deed for the day." There was something refreshingly unpretentious in his demeanor, something that stood out in the artificially refined atmosphere all around them. His tuxedo, though clearly expensive, seemed to make him slightly uneasy, as if he'd preferred jeans and a t-shirt. "Emily," she replied, regaining her professional composure, "if you'll excuse me, I need to—" Right, he said, smiling as he stepped aside, "but maybe we can pick this up later. I promise not to cause any more near disasters." She should have said no. It was against every rule to mingle with the guests. But there was something in that smile, something that made her heart beat faster in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. "Maybe," she answered mysteriously, before moving away to continue her work. Over the following 2 hours, Emily found herself searching for Anthony among the crowd. She saw him chatting in small groups, always looking slightly out of place amid the affected laughter and talk of yachts and summer homes. At one point, their eyes met across the room, and he pulled a comical face, imitating a more pompous guest, making her stifle a laugh. During her 15-minute break, she discovered a moment of peace in the conservatory adjoining the main hall. The place was an architectural marvel, featuring glass walls and Art Nouveau iron supports. Ferns and orchids hung from the ceiling in elaborate arrangements, providing an oasis of calm amid the party's bustle. "So this is where you're hiding?" Anthony's voice startled her, but not unpleasantly. He was carrying 2 glasses of water with lemon. I thought you might be thirsty. You shouldn't be here, she warned, though she accepted the drink. If Miss Davies sees us... Ms. Davies is too busy critiquing the timing of the appetizers to notice anything, he said with a smile, sitting next to her on the wrought iron bench. Besides, technically, this is your break, right? You deserve a moment to breathe. Something about the way he spoke intrigued her. It was as though he knew exactly how these events operated behind the scenes, not like a guest, but more like someone who understood their inner workings. You seem to know a lot about how these parties run, she observed, studying his profile as he gazed at the garden. Anthony shrugged casually, like the gesture was a habit. Let's just say I've attended more than my share of social events, although I much prefer a quiet cafe or a stroll in the park. Really? Emily smiled, imagining him in the simple environment of the Blooming Day Cafe. And what else do you like, besides quiet cafes? Books, music. I play piano, though not as well as I'd like. What about you? Besides rescuing champagne glasses from a tragic end, what do you do? His question caught her off guard. For a moment, she considered mentioning her dance background, but something held her back. Instead, she said, I work at a cafe. A real one. Not this fancy version tonight. Sounds interesting. Meeting all sorts of people every day, seeing a little of their lives. Most of the time, they barely notice we exist, she laughed softly. But yes, sometimes there are nice surprises. The look they shared then carried more weight, as if both understood they weren't just talking about the cafe anymore. The distant sound of the orchestra beginning to play reached them, a soft waltz that made Emily's fingertips tingle with reminders of dance steps long unpracticed. Do you dance? Anthony asked, noticing her reaction to the music. I used to, a long time ago. He stood, extending his hand in a silent invitation. We've got our own private ballroom here in the conservatory for a few minutes. It'd be a shame to waste such beautiful music. I really shouldn't. My uniform bark the rules. Sometimes, he said with a smile, his hand still offered, the best stories start when we break a few rules. Maybe it was the music, the magical setting of the conservatory, or simply the way he looked at her, like she was far more than just a waitress in a borrowed uniform. Whatever it was, Emily took his hand. Anthony guided her with a natural grace that surprised her, their steps perfectly in sync, as though they'd danced together many times before. Hidden among the ferns, shielded by the muffled sounds of the party, they created their own timeless moment. You dance too well for someone who claims to prefer quiet cafes, she noted, as he led her in a gentle twirl. And you dance too well for someone who says she quit a long time ago, he replied, his eyes shining with what might have been admiration. The music reached its end, and so did the enchantment of that moment. Emily knew she had to return to her duties, to the role assigned to her for that evening. But something had changed. A door she thought was closed had opened a crack. I have to go, she said softly, slipping from his arms. I know. Anthony pulled a business card from his jacket pocket, hesitated, then handed it to her. But maybe we can continue this dance somewhere else, another day. Emily glanced at the card. He'd written his cell number on the back, the thin cardstock marked by a neat but slightly careless handwriting. Maybe, she responded, a sly smile on her lips as she tucked the card into her uniform pocket. Snatching a napkin from the nearest tray, she scribbled her own number. In case you need someone else to save more champagne glasses. The rest of the evening drifted by like a hazy dream. Emily went through her tasks mechanically, her body moving with practiced efficiency, while her thoughts stayed with those few minutes in the conservatory. Occasionally, she caught glimpses of Anthony among the guests. He always smiled whenever their eyes met, as though sharing a secret treasure. She saw him one last time as the celebration ended. He was leaving through the main lobby with a group of guests, but he turned to look toward the staff area, as if he knew she'd be there. Their eyes met one final time across the now mostly empty hall, and he made a small gesture with his hand. Not a goodbye wave, but a silent promise that this wouldn't be the last time they saw each other. While she helped with the final cleanup, Emily touched the card in her pocket, feeling the smooth edges of the quality paper beneath her fingers. The conservatory was dark now, the ferns casting intricate shadows in the moonlight, streaming through the glass panels. But she could still hear the music in her head, could still feel the warmth of Anthony's hand in hers, guiding her through a dance that seemed to have lasted both a moment and an eternity. Ms. Davies gathered the staff for a final debrief, praising the impeccable service. Emily barely heard the compliments. Her mind was busy weaving possibilities, envisioning future scenarios that, until a few hours ago, had seemed impossible. "You're different," Sophie said when they met at the staff exit. Her friend had worked in another section of the hall during the party and hadn't seen what had happened in the conservatory. "There's something in your eyes. Did you meet someone?" Emily merely smiled, slinging her bag over her shoulder as they headed to the bus stop. The night was pleasantly mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the fragrance of flowers from the manor's garden. "Maybe," she answered, using that same word that had become a sort of lucky charm throughout the evening. "Or maybe I just rediscovered something I thought I'd lost." Sophie studied her for a moment, then smiled and linked her arm through Emily's. "Whatever it is, it did you good. Your eyes are shining like they used to when you talked about dancing." The comment struck Emily in an unexpected way. It was true. For the first time in ages, she felt that old spark of possibility, that sense that the world wasn't just an endless sequence of identical days. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and her heart leapt when she saw a message from an unknown number. "I really enjoyed dancing with you tonight. How about meeting for coffee? I know a great place, maybe not as glamorous as tonight's venue." Emily smiled at her phone screen, feeling her cheeks warm as she typed her reply. "I know an even better cafe, but you'll have to trust me." The reply came almost instantly. "I always trust the coffee expert. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. "Maybe," she typed, then deleted it, laughing at her own hesitation. "Yes," she finally wrote. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Sophie watched the message exchange with a knowing grin, but kept her questions to herself. Instead, she started softly humming, the same waltz Emily had danced with Anthony in the conservatory. The bus ride home had never felt so short. The city lights flew past the window like falling stars, and Emily allowed herself, for the first time in a long while, to daydream. Not about the past, like she usually did, but about the future, one that suddenly seemed full of unexplored possibilities. When she got home, she found Emma still awake, studying for her residency exam at their small kitchen table. Her roommate looked up from her books, ready to ask about the evening, but something in Emily's expression made her pause. "You seem different," Emma noted, closing her anatomy textbook. "Something special happened at the wedding." Emily slipped off her shoes, feeling the immediate relief in her tired feet, and sat at the table with her friend. "I met someone," she said simply, her hand instinctively touching the pocket where Anthony's card rested. "Someone interesting?" Emma asked, pushing her half-finished mug of coffee toward Emily. "Very," Emily replied, taking the coffee. "He's different. I can't exactly explain how, but it's like you've known him for a long time," Emma offered, a sympathetic smile on her tired face. "Yes, exactly," Emily agreed, surprised at how precisely Emma had described it. "We're going to meet tomorrow for coffee. At Blooming Day Cafe. Yes, seems fitting, doesn't it?" Starting where it all began, in a way. Emma nodded, and then her face grew a bit serious. "Just be careful, okay? Not necessarily with him, but with your own expectations. Sometimes people aren't who we think they are." Emily knew Emma was only trying to protect her. After years living together, Emma understood her vulnerabilities, her deepest fears. "I know," she said softly, "but I think this time it might be worth the risk." Later, lying in bed, Emily replayed the evening's events in her mind, the near disaster with the champagne, Anthony's crooked smile, their hidden dance in the conservatory. Every moment seemed surrounded by a sort of magic, as though it came straight from the pages of a modern fairy tale. Her phone buzzed one last time that night. "Good night, my conservatory dancer. Dream of waltzes and secret gardens. See you tomorrow. A." Emily smiled at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard for a moment before she replied, "Good night, champagne glass hero. See you tomorrow." Putting the phone on her nightstand, she closed her eyes, letting the distant sound of late-night traffic become, in her mind, the soft notes of the waltz they danced to. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring, but for now, she would let herself live in this moment, in that space between dreams and reality, where anything felt possible. Monday arrived with the familiarity of an old demanding friend. Emily pushed open the back door of Blooming Day Cafe at 6:45 a.m., as she did every morning, but there was something lighter in her step that did not go unnoticed. "Someone's in a good mood," Marcus remarked as he checked the coffee bean supply. His mustache twitched in a half-smile while he observed Emily humming quietly as she tied on her apron. The morning rush was especially busy that day. Between serving freshly baked pastries and preparing coffee orders, Emily checked her phone whenever she could. Anthony had sent a text early in the morning. "Good morning, dancing waitress. I already miss your coffee." A smile tugged at her lips as she typed a quick reply. Their messages were like small moments of sweetness that brightened her day. But something puzzled her. Anthony always seemed to be busy with important meetings or sudden trips, vaguely mentioning work obligations. "Earth to Emily!" Sophie snapped her fingers in front of Emily's face. "Table 3 has been waiting for their order for 5 minutes. "Sorry," Emily apologized, quickly pocketing her phone. Reality didn't have time for daydreams. During her lunch break, she sat in Marcus's cramped office, eating a sandwich while going over the month's accounts. Aunt Margaret had called earlier, reminding her about the health insurance payment and the rent for the apartment. The stack of bills looked bigger than usual this month. Her phone buzzed again. "I have to travel for work this week. I'll be back Sunday," already counting the days. Emily felt a pang in her chest. This was the third work trip in 2 weeks. Whenever she asked about his job, Anthony would dodge the subject with a charming smile or a quick joke. "Another trip," she texted back, trying to keep a light tone. "You must be really busy." "Just too much work. I promise I'll make it up to you when I get back." Coffee on Sunday. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of coffee orders, wiping tables, and occasional texts from Anthony. Every time her phone vibrated, Emily felt that familiar twinge in her stomach, mixed with growing restlessness. Why was he so vague about his life? That night, at their apartment, Emma found Emily sitting on the small balcony, staring out over the city. "Want to talk about it?" her friend asked, offering a cup of tea. "It's Anthony," Emily sighed. "There's something odd about him. He's always so secretive about his work, his life. Sometimes I feel like I only know part of him." Emma blew on her tea before answering. "Maybe he has his reasons. You guys haven't known each other very long, Emily. Not everyone opens up easily." "I know, but..." Emily paused, searching for the right words. "It's as though he lives in 2 different worlds. The Anthony I know is sweet, funny, present. But there's this other side of him, this life he never talks about. Does it change how you feel about him?" "No." "Yes. I'm not sure," Emily admitted. "It changes everything and nothing at the same time. I wish I could trust him completely, you know." Her phone buzzed with a new text. "Thinking of you, how your eyes shine when you smile. How I wish I could be there right now." Emily looked out at the city again. The lights of the buildings glowed like earthbound stars, some more distant and unreachable than others. Somewhere out there, Anthony was living his mysterious life, a life of which she only knew bits and pieces. Her own life was a collection of responsibilities. The cafe, bills to pay, supporting Aunt Margaret who had sacrificed so much to raise her. There was no room for uncertainty or secrets. "Sometimes," she murmured, recalling his words in the conservatory, "the best stories start when we break a few rules." With a long sigh, she typed her reply, "Sunday is fine. But before that, we need to talk. For real this time." His response took a few minutes. "I know I have a lot to explain, and I promise I'll tell you everything. No more mysteries." Emily looked at Emma, who was still patiently waiting by her side. "Do you think I'm being paranoid?" "I think you're being cautious," Emma said, "and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I also think sometimes we need to give people a chance to surprise us." The rest of the week was an exercise in patience and self-control. There were bills to pay, work shifts to cover, and real life to face. But for the first time in a while, Emily felt that maybe, just maybe, it was worth taking a risk. And if it didn't work out, well, at least she'd danced her waltz in the conservatory. Sometimes a truly magical moment was worth more than a lifetime of predictable certainties. The Park of Lights was an oasis of tranquility in the heart of the city. On a particularly pleasant Sunday morning, Emily strolled along its tree-shaded paths, watching how the sunlight filtered through the branches of century-old trees, creating dancing patterns on the paved ground. Anthony waited for her near the central fountain, wearing jeans and a simple shirt, an outfit that made him blend in perfectly with the families and couples enjoying the park. When he saw her, his face lit up with that trademark smile that made her heart skip a beat. "You look lovely," he said, kissing her softly. Emily wore a simple floral dress, chosen after hours of deliberation with Emma. "Ready for our walk?" They started strolling side by side, their arms occasionally brushing in a shy dance of closeness. Anthony seemed different today. There was a tension underlying his usual warmth, a seriousness behind his smile. "So," he began as they passed a group of children feeding ducks, "how was your week?" Emily told him about her days at the cafe, a particularly demanding customer whom Sophie managed to please with her infinite patience, the new recipes Marcus was trying out. It was easy talking to Anthony. It had always been easy, since that first evening in the conservatory. "And you?" she asked, noticing how distracted he seemed. "How was your trip?" Anthony stopped walking, his gaze fixed on a faraway point. "Actually, Emily, we need to talk about that. About me. About who I really am." Her heart seemed to skip a beat. "What do you mean?" He guided her to a nearby bench, partly hidden by a weeping willow. It was a quiet spot, private enough for a serious conversation, yet still in view of other park visitors. "Remember when we met at the wedding?" he began, his hands fidgeting with a fallen leaf. "You assumed I was just another guest, and I never corrected you." Emily felt a chill in her stomach. "Anthony, what's going on?" He took a deep breath like he was summoning courage. "My full name is Anthony Lefebvre. My family owns Crystal Manor, among other businesses in the city. In fact, we own a good part of the city's historic buildings." The world seemed to stand still for a moment. Emily felt like all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Lefebvre. The name was everywhere, on buildings, in newspaper headlines, in whispered conversations about the real power brokers in town. You're a Lefebvre," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "I am," he confirmed, finally meeting her eyes. "But that doesn't change who I am, Emily. The guy who danced with you in the conservatory, who loves breakfast at 3 in the afternoon and prefers jazz to classical music. That's me, the real me. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Her question came out more hurt than she intended. Anthony ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she recognized. "Because for the first time in a long while, someone saw me just as Anthony, not as the Lefebvre heir, not as the rebellious son who refuses to follow his father's plans. Just me." Emily tried to process everything, the mysterious trips, the urgent calls, the way he always dodged questions about his job. It was all making sense now. "That night at the wedding," she began slowly, "you weren't really there as a guest, were you?" "It was my cousin's wedding," he admitted. "I was supposed to be at the main table, networking with investors and politicians. Instead, I spent the most special night of my life dancing in secret with a waitress in the conservatory." There was so much affection in his voice when he said that Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. "Why are you telling me all this now?" "Because," he turned fully toward her, taking her hands in his, "I'm in love with you, Emily. And I don't want to, keep hiding who I am from the person who means so much to me." The bench beneath them seemed to dissolve. Emily felt like she was floating between the reality she knew and a new world opening before her eyes. "There's more," Anthony went on, his voice filled with anticipation. "I've watched you work at the cafe. Your dedication, your way with people, your eye for detail. We're expanding the hospitality side of the company with new hotels and restaurants. We need talented people in management, people with real experience, not just expensive degrees." "Anthony," she tried to interject, but he gently stopped her. I'm not offering this because we're together. I'm offering because you're talented, Emily. You genuinely understand what it means to serve people, to make them feel special. This is a chance for growth, for a solid career path. It was too much. The revelations, the proposal, everything swirled in her mind like a whirlwind of possibilities and fears. I need time to process all this. Anthony opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by his phone's abrupt ringing. He looked at the screen and frowned. It's my brother. He never calls on Sundays. Emily watched his expression shift. First confusion, then concern, and finally pure fear she'd never seen in his features before. Oh God. When? Which hospital? He asked urgently. I'm on my way. Hanging up, he turned to Emily, pale. My dad, he had a heart attack during a meeting. He's at St. Marie Hospital. I have to... Go, she said immediately. Go, Anthony. He hesitated a moment, clearly torn. Emily, we'll talk later. Your family needs you right now. He nodded, leaning in to kiss her forehead quickly before hurrying toward the parking lot. Emily watched him disappear, feeling like the last 30 minutes had been a particularly vivid dream. St. Marie Hospital was an imposing structure of glass and steel, located in the most upscale area of the city. Anthony charged through the main lobby like a whirlwind, hardly noticing the staff's looks of recognition. In the VIP section of the cardiac wing, he found his family gathered. His mother, Hélène Lefebvre, sat stiffly in an armchair, twisting a silk handkerchief in her hands as though her life depended on it. His older brother, Philippe, paced back and forth, talking on the phone in hushed tones. His sister, Marie, stood by their mother, holding her hand silently. Where is he? How is he? Anthony asked, unable to hide the panic in his voice. In surgery, Philippe replied, hanging up his phone. It was a massive heart attack. The doctors are doing everything they can, but the next 2 hours were an eternity compressed into minutes. The Lefebvre family, used to controlling everything in their lives, was now at fate's mercy. Anthony alternated between restless sitting and pacing the corridors, his phone heavy in his pocket, with unanswered messages from Emily. When the doctor finally appeared, his expression said everything before he even spoke. Mrs. Lefebvre, he began, addressing the matriarch of the family. We did everything within our power. His mother's stifled cry echoed through the hallway. Marie immediately embraced her, while Philippe closed his eyes, his hands forming tight fists. Anthony felt his legs give way, and he had to lean against the nearest wall. Bernard Lefebvre, the patriarch who had built an empire, the father Anthony had challenged yet secretly wanted to impress, was dead. The hospital corridor erupted in a flurry of activity, nurses offering water and sedatives, family lawyers appearing as if summoned, reporters already clustering at the hospital entrance. Amid the chaos, Anthony pulled out his phone and, with trembling fingers, typed a message to Emily. He's gone. I don't know what to do. Back at the Park of Lights, Emily still sat on the same bench watching the sun begin to set. When she read his message, tears rolled down her cheeks, not just for Anthony's father, a man she'd never met, but for all the weight carried by those simple words. Anthony's world, which she had just discovered, was already shifting again. And neither of them knew what would come next. The coffee in her cup grew cold as Emily stared at her phone for what felt like the 1000th time. Anthony's last text, "He's gone. I don't know what to do," remained there like an open wound refusing to heal. 3 days had passed since their meeting in the park, 3 days that felt like an eternity. You should eat something, Sophie insisted, sliding a croissant toward her. It was before the cafe opened, the sun barely up, and the two of them were sitting at the counter preparing for another workday. Emily picked up the croissant automatically, but couldn't bring herself to take a bite. I just wish I knew if he's okay, she muttered, more to herself than to Sophie. On the other side of town, in the sleek offices of Lefebvre Holdings, Anthony slumped in a leather armchair, his tie loosened and dark circles under his eyes revealing sleepless nights. In front of him, a stack of documents awaited his attention. We need your signature on these contracts by the end of the day, his brother Philippe declared, entering with more papers. And there's a board meeting in half an hour. Anthony glanced at his silent phone on the desk. Dozens of unread messages from Emily flashed on the screen, each one a tiny stab to his heart. "How's Mom?" he asked, buying a few more seconds before diving into the next urgent matter. "As you'd expect," Philippe replied, his voice softening slightly. "Marie's with her." "The funeral arrangements." Anthony closed his eyes for a moment. The funeral. Tomorrow they'd have to face that ceremony. The empty condolences from people who barely knew his father. The press hungry for photos of a grieving family. 2 days earlier, the 30th floor boardroom was full. Board members, lawyers, executives, all eyes fixed on Anthony as he tried to absorb the torrent of information being thrown at him. "The transition must be smooth," someone said. "The market can't see any sign of weakness. The ongoing projects can't stop," added another. "Especially the revitalization of the historic district." Anthony stared at the empty seat at the head of the table, his father's seat, and felt the weight of generations of expectations on his shoulders. Bernard Lefebvre had built an empire from nothing. What would his rebellious son do with that legacy? It's back in the present. Emily was mechanically serving coffee at Billionaire Cafe, hiding the turmoil in her mind behind each routine gesture. The revelation of Anthony's true identity still echoed in her thoughts. "More coffee, miss?" she asked a regular customer. Only too late realizing the cup was still half full. "Is everything all right, dear?" the elderly woman asked, noticing her distraction. "You look so down today." Emily forced a smile. How could she explain that she'd fallen for a man who turned out to be one of the city's most powerful heirs? That he'd offered her an opportunity that could change her life, only to vanish completely soon after. That evening, in her apartment, she found herself watching old news clips about the Lefebvre family. There was Anthony, younger, at a ribbon-cutting ceremony alongside his father. His features were softer, but he already wore that slight discomfort with formalities she'd noticed at the wedding. "Still no word?" Emma asked, entering the room after her hospital shift. Emily shook her head. "I know he's going through a lot, but it wouldn't take more than a minute to send a text," Emma finished, sitting beside her friend. In the Lefebvre offices, Anthony finally found a moment of solitude. It was late, and even the most dedicated employees had gone home. He picked up his phone, opening Emily's messages. "I'm sorry for the silence. I wish I could explain." He deleted the text before sending. How could he explain that he was suffocating under the weight of new responsibilities, that each time he thought of calling her, a new crisis demanded his attention? A flash of memory seized him. His father, years ago, sitting in this very office. Some 15 years earlier. "One day all this will be yours, Anthony," Bernard Lefebvre said, gesturing at the city lights framed by the office windows. "It's not just a business, it's a legacy, a responsibility to the city, to the people who depend on us." 13-year-old Anthony gazed in fascination at the skyline below. "But what if I want something different, Dad?" Bernard smiled, a smile Anthony now recognized held both pride and concern. "Sometimes, son, it's not about what we want, but what we must do." Emily looked at her phone one last time before bed. No new messages. Outside her window, she could see the top of Lefebvre Tower glowing against the night sky. Was Anthony there, thinking about her the way she thought about him? The next morning, Billionaire Cafe bustled with activity. Marcus had launched a new breakfast menu, and customers lined up to try it. Between greeting clients, Emily barely had time to check her phone. Almost. "You can't keep going like this," Sophie said during their break. "You're torturing yourself." "I know," Emily sighed, "but I can't stop thinking about his proposal. Working at Lefebvre Holdings would be an incredible chance." "Even if he vanished on you afterward?" Sophie asked gently. "Even knowing people will always see you as the boss's girlfriend?" The question hit Emily like a punch to the gut. It was something she'd been avoiding thinking about, the implications of accepting a job from the man she was falling for. Meanwhile, at the Lefebvre offices, Anthony faced his own battles. Between meeting after meeting, each new decision weighed heavily on him. His thoughts kept drifting back to that afternoon in the park, how Emily's eyes had widened at his revelation, how she hadn't run away but asked for time he was now filling with silence. "Mr. Lefebvre," His secretary interrupted his thoughts. "Your mother is online too." Anthony picked up the phone, steeling himself for another difficult conversation. His mother was coping with her loss by diving headlong into planning the funeral, treating every detail as if it were a crucial mission. "Anthony, dear," Helene's weary voice came through the receiver. "We need to discuss the speech you'll give tomorrow." The funeral tomorrow. Reality crashed over him yet again. "Mom, I don't know if I can—" "You're a Lefebvre," she interrupted gently. "Your father always said you were the strongest of us all, even if you didn't believe it." Her words echoed long after the call ended. Had his father really said that? The same father with whom he'd argued countless times over the future of the company, over his own choices. In her apartment that night, Emily stumbled on an online article about Bernard Lefebvre's passing. The piece mentioned a private funeral the following day, reserved for family and close friends. Her fingers hovered over her phone's keyboard. Should she send a message of condolences? What right did she have, really? They'd only been seeing each other for a few weeks, plus a bombshell revelation. What place did she hold in Anthony's life? The silence between them was becoming deafening, filled only by the noise of her fears and doubts. Emily knew she had to give Anthony space to grieve, to handle his new responsibilities. But each day without hearing from him caused her heart to tighten a bit more. At his desk, Anthony stared at a photo of his father, a picture of a strong, determined man who had built an empire. How would he handle everything? How would he balance duty with his own desires and Emily? The thought of her hurt. It hurt because he knew he was hurting her with his silence, and because she represented everything he wanted for himself: simplicity, honesty, the freedom to just be himself. The sun began setting over the city, painting the sky pink and gold. In different corners of the metropolis, two people gazed at the same sky, their hearts weighed down by unspoken words and unexpressed feelings. The silence continued, deafening in its eloquence. A week had passed since that day in the park. But to Emily, it felt like a lifetime. The breakfast routine at Bloomingday Cafe went on as usual, the smell of fresh bread, the clinking of cups, the hushed chatter of early risers. But something in the air felt different, as though the world had shifted in some fundamental way, even if everything appeared the same on the surface. "Emily!" Marcus called from behind the counter, holding up the morning paper. "Could you handle table 5? Sophie's busy with a big order." She nodded, automatically tying her apron more securely as she moved toward the table. Then her eyes caught the headline on the newspaper Marcus was holding: "Lefebvre Empire in Mourning. Private Ceremony for Bernard Lefebvre." The world froze for a second. There, in black and white, was a photo of the Lefebvre family leaving the cemetery. Anthony was present, supporting an elegant woman, probably his mother, his face etched with an expression Emily had never seen, a mix of pain and determination that made her want to step into the picture and comfort him. "Miss, my coffee, please." The customer's voice snapped her back to reality. She apologized and got back to her work, but her mind was stuck on what she had just seen. Across town, on the 30th floor of the Lefebvre Tower, Anthony was buried in a mountain of paperwork. His new office, his father's old office, still carried traces of its previous occupant: the faint smell of Cuban tobacco, the meticulous arrangement of objects on the mahogany desk, the commanding view of the city his father had loved so much. "These are the financial reports for the last quarter, sir," his new assistant, Mademoiselle Dubois, announced, placing another folder on his desk. "And the board wants you at the meeting at 2. Anthony rubbed his face, feeling the stubble. When was the last time he'd slept more than 4 hours? The days blurred into an endless stream of meetings, decisions, and responsibilities. His phone vibrated, another message from Emily. His heart clenched at the sight of her name on the screen. How could he possibly explain that every unanswered message felt like a tiny torture? That he desperately wanted to call her, hear her voice, lose himself in her comforting presence. "Anthony?" Philippe entered the office without knocking. "We need to finalize our press strategy. They're not letting up on speculating about the transition in leadership." "Not now, Philippe," Anthony groaned, but his brother had already settled in, spreading out newspaper clippings on the desk. "Yes, now," Philippe pressed. "The company can't show weakness." Dad always said, "I'm not Dad," Anthony exploded, standing abruptly. The stunned silence that followed was crushing. Philippe studied him for a moment, his expression softening. "No, you're not, and nobody expects you to be, but you are a Lefebvre, and now more than ever we need to stand together." His brother's words echoed in Anthony's head long after he left. Together. That's what his father had always preached. Family above all else, the legacy above individual desires. But where did Emily fit in this? At Bloomingday Cafe, the afternoon dragged slowly. Emily absently wiped an already spotless table, eyes wandering through the large window. Across the street, Lefebvre Tower rose against the blue sky, imposing and unreachable. "You have to go there," Sophie said gently, appearing beside her. "This uncertainty is killing you." "And say what?" Emily asked, her voice weary from sleepless nights. "Sorry for your loss. Why haven't you answered my messages? Do you still want me to work for you?" "How about starting with the truth?" Sophie suggested. "That you're worried about him, that you understand he's going through a tough time, but that you're hurting too because of his silence." Emily gazed again at the skyscraper. How many times in the past week had she imagined Anthony up there, juggling responsibilities she could barely fathom? The man who danced with her in a hidden conservatory felt so distant now, like a character from a dream she'd just woken from. The decision formed in her mind before she fully realized it. After her shift, she took a quick shower, put on her most formal outfit, a simple navy blue dress, and headed for Lefebvre Tower. The lobby was grand, all marble and glass, with a central fountain gently gurgling. Discreet but alert security guards monitored everyone passing through the metal detectors and electronic turnstiles. "May I help you?" asked the receptionist, her professional tone masking the quick, assessing glance she gave Emily's modest attire. "Yes, I need to see Anthony Lefebvre," she replied, surprised at how firm her own voice sounded. "Mr. Lefebvre is in a meeting. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but—" Emily hesitated. How could she explain she was the waitress he'd fallen for before she found out he was a billionaire heir? "Emily," the familiar voice made her turn around. Marie Lefebvre, Anthony's sister, whom Emily recognized from the newspaper photos, stood there, looking at her with recognition. "Anthony told me about you," Marie said, approaching. "A lot. Come with me." Before the receptionist could protest, Marie was already guiding Emily through mirrored hallways. Inside the private elevator, Marie finally broke the silence. "He's not well, you know, tries to act like he is, but Anthony has always been the most sensitive among us. He just hides it better." Emily simply nodded, unable to find the right words. The elevator stopped on the 30th floor, and Marie led her through a maze of offices toward a quieter area. "Mademoiselle Dubois," Marie addressed the assistant sitting before an imposing door. "Please cancel my brother's next appointments." The assistant began to protest, but Marie was already opening the door. "Anthony, there's someone here who needs to speak with you." Anthony stood by the window, his silhouette outlined against the late afternoon sky. When he turned and saw Emily, all the fatigue and tension drained from his face, replaced by something else: relief. Marie quietly closed the door behind them, leaving them alone. For a moment, neither spoke. The office felt too small to contain the weight of all that had gone unspoken between them. "Emily, Anthony began, but she cut him off. "It didn't have to be like this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I would have understood. I would have given you all the space you needed, but this silence—" "I know," he replied, stepping closer. "There's no excuse. Every day that passed, it got harder to respond, to explain, to... I've been drowning in responsibilities I never asked for, trying to be someone I'm not." "And who are you, Anthony?" she asked softly. "The man from the conservatory, or the executive in the 30th floor office?" The question hovered between them like a loaded cloud. Anthony moved closer, stopping only a few steps away. "Both. Neither. I'm not sure anymore," he admitted. "All I know is that during that dance, in that conservatory, I felt more like myself than I had in years, and it terrified me." Emily felt tears pricking at her eyes. "Why?" "Because for the first time, I had something to lose that truly mattered, something that was mine, not just the Lefebvre family's. And then my dad, his voice faltered. Everything fell apart so fast. He moved closer still, his hands finding hers almost instinctively. About the offer I made in the park, he continued, the one about working for the company. It wasn't just because you're talented, though you really are. It was my selfish way of trying to keep you close, building a bridge between our worlds. And now? Emily asked, heart pounding. Now? Anthony's smile was tinged with sadness. Now I realize how unfair that was of me. You deserve to make that choice for yourself, not for me. You deserve to build your own career, your own path. Emily looked down at their intertwined hands, then out at the city through the massive window. Far below, she could see Billionaire Cafe, tiny but welcoming. You know what hurt me the most, she finally said. Not discovering who you really were, not even the silence this week. It was thinking that maybe what happened in the conservatory meant more to me than it did to you. Emily, Anthony said, cradling her face in his hands and lifting her gaze to his. That night, that dance, was the most genuine moment of my life. I spent every minute of this silence hating the distance I was creating between us, but not knowing how to come back. A soft knock interrupted them. From beyond the door, Mademoiselle Dubois' muffled voice said, Mr. Lefebvre, the board is waiting. Anthony closed his eyes briefly, the weight of his responsibilities evident in each line of his face. When he opened them again, there was a new resolve. They can wait, he called out loud enough to be heard. Then more quietly to Emily, I've spent too much time letting others dictate my life. What does that mean? She asked, her heart thrumming with unspoken possibilities. It means I want to do this right this time, he said, voice gentle. No secrets, no pressure, no assumptions. Just us figuring out how to bridge these two different worlds. Emily felt the corners of her mouth curve into a smile, the first genuine one in days. And how do we do that? How about we start with some coffee, he suggested, a familiar twinkle returning to his eyes. I know a great place with the best waitress in town, though she might be busy considering other career opportunities. Actually, Emily said, her grin widening, she's still deciding. Some decisions shouldn't be made with a broken heart. Anthony pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. How about now? Is your heart still broken? No, she whispered. But it'll take time to trust again. Time is all I want to give you, he replied softly. That, and the promise never to disappear again, no matter how scared or overwhelmed I feel. Outside the office, the city kept up its frantic pace. In some boardroom nearby, an impatient group of directors waited for their new leader. Down at Billionaire Cafe, customers came and went, oblivious to the drama unfolding high above. But in that moment, in that 30th floor office, two seemingly incompatible worlds began to find common ground. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. But perhaps the love that began with a secret dance in a conservatory was strong enough to build bridges over any chasm. The ballroom at Le Grand was packed for the annual Lefebvre charity event. Emily fidgeted with the black dress Marie had loaned her, feeling like an actress in a role she wasn't prepared for. All around her, the city's elite circulated with a confidence she couldn't help but envy. You okay? Anthony whispered, his hand finding hers under the table. He looked perfectly at home in his tux, though Emily knew he would have preferred a more casual outfit. Sure, she fibbed, eyeing a group of elegantly dressed women staring and whispering about her. Just trying to remember which fork is the salad one. Anthony smiled, but concern lingered in his eyes. Over the past few weeks, he'd tried to help her navigate this new world, but each social function felt like a different test for which Emily never felt fully prepared. Anthony, darling, called a melodic voice. A stunning woman in a red gown approached the table, her high heels clicking on the marble floor. It's been forever. Chloe, Anthony acknowledged, his posture tensing almost imperceptibly. Didn't know you were back in town. London got boring, she said with a casual shrug, her blue eyes finally turning to Emily. And you must be the waitress, right? How adorable. The way she said adorable felt like a velvet-gloved slap. Anthony tightened his grip on Emily's hand beneath the table. Emily is my girlfriend, he said firmly, and she's doing incredible work in the hospitality restructuring at our company. Oh yes, I heard something about that, Chloe smiled, her gleaming white teeth contrasting with her red lipstick. How innovative of you, mixing business with pleasure. Before Anthony could respond, Hélène Lefebvre appeared, her pearl grey dress exuding elegance. Chloe, dear, what a lovely surprise. Come, there are a few people you must meet. As the two walked away, Emily exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. So, that's the famous Chloe. Anthony ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she knew well. College X meant nothing. But it meant something to your mother, apparently, Emily noted, watching Hélène and Chloe chatting animatedly with a circle of socialites. The dinner that followed was an exercise in restraint. Emily felt the assessing looks, overheard whispered remarks. Every bite she took was cautious, every sip of wine calculated. Later that night, in Anthony's apartment, she finally let the pretense fade. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, kicking off her heels with relief. Do what? Anthony asked, loosening his tie. All of this. The events, the dinners, the constant judgment, the endless waiting for me to stumble. Anthony approached, wrapping her in his arms. Hey, you're doing great, and you don't need to please anyone but yourself. It's not that simple, she sighed. I see how your mother looks at me, how everyone looks at me. To them, I'll always be the waitress who struck gold. Emily, look at me, Anthony said, gently cupping her face. You are the most genuine person I've ever met. That's what made me fall in love with you. Don't let this world change that. But it was changing her, she thought. The carefree Emily who once danced in a secret conservatory was fading into the distance. The next morning at the office, Anthony faced his own challenges. A stack of reports awaited his review, and Philippe kept texting about an important meeting with investors. Your coffee, sir, Mademoiselle Dubois said, entering with a steaming cup. And Miss Chloe is here to see you. No appointment. Anthony sighed. Tell her I'm busy. Actually, Chloe slid in before the assistant could respond. It's urgent. About the historic district project. Once the assistant left, Chloe settled into the chair across from Anthony's desk with the familiarity of someone who had occupied it often. The project's in good hands, Anthony said firmly. We don't need new investors. Okay, but my father insists, she replied with a bright smile. Besides, it'll be just like old times. Remember what a great team we made. Things have changed, Chloe. Have they? She cocked her head. Because from where I stand, you're still the same Anthony I knew. You're just trying to convince yourself otherwise. Back at Blooming Day Cafe, Emily served coffee on autopilot. Sophie noticed her distraction. Earth to Emily. What's going on? I met his ex last night, Emily confessed. Chloe, she's everything I'm not. Sophie frowned. And that's a bad thing because she belongs in his world, Sophie. She knows all the rules, all the codes. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to figure out which fork to use. Yet he fell in love with you, not her, Sophie pointed out with a smile. Before Emily could reply, her phone buzzed with a text from Anthony. Lunch today? I need to tell you something. Emily's heart sank. Messages like that rarely brought good news. The restaurant Anthony chose was discreet, but classy. Emily felt grateful to be wearing one of her new dresses, a gift from Marie, who had decided her future sister-in-law needed a suitable wardrobe. Chloe dropped by the office today, Anthony said as soon as their meals arrived. Her father wants to invest in the historic district project. Oh, Emily said, pushing her salad around. Is that good for the company? Probably, he admitted. But I don't want to mix the past and the present. I explained that to Philippe, but he thinks I'm letting personal issues interfere with business. Are you? Anthony studied her for a moment. Maybe, but not for the reasons he thinks. I don't trust Chloe's motives. And what would those motives be? Control, he answered simply. That's always been her way. Everything is a power game. Emily thought for a moment, then squared her shoulders. So don't let it be. If the investment is good for the company, accept it. Show her the past is in the past. Anthony smiled, taking her hand across the table. When did you get so savvy about business? Maybe I've been learning something from these endless meetings, she joked, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. That evening, alone in her tiny apartment, Emily studied her reflection in the mirror. The new dress was lovely, her hair styled as Marie had taught her, but her eyes, they were still the same eyes of a waitress who once danced in a hidden garden. Her phone vibrated with a message from the Lefebvre family group chat. Yes, she was now part of the Lefebvre family WhatsApp group. It was an invitation to Sunday lunch at the family mansion. P.S. Chloe and her parents will be there too. Business matters, Marie added in a private message. Keep your head up. You're one of us now. Emily looked at her reflection again. Was this really what she wanted? To be one of them? And if so, how much of herself would she have to lose in the process? In his own apartment, Anthony gazed out the panoramic windows, a barely touched glass of whiskey in his hand. Somewhere between taking over the company and trying not to lose Emily, he felt he was losing himself. His phone rang. It was Philippe. The DuPonts agreed to the terms, his brother said without preamble. Chloe will present the proposal tomorrow. I'll be there, Anthony answered mechanically. The waters they were now navigating were deep and uncharted. Time would tell if they'd learn to swim together or let the currents carry them in different directions. Lefebvre Holdings' finance department occupied the entire 25th floor of the headquarters. That Friday evening, Emily was alone in the office, reviewing hospitality reports. As part of her training, she was learning about every aspect of the business, determined to prove her worth beyond her relationship with Anthony. The computer's glow lit her concentrated face while she clicked through the numbers. Her background at the cafe hadn't prepared her for corporate finance, but she had a keen eye for detail, honed by years of balancing registers and inventory at Bloomingday. That was when she noticed something odd. The cost sheets for the Historic District Revitalization Project showed subtle discrepancies, numbers that didn't add up, transfers to unfamiliar companies. At a glance, it looked like corporate red tape, but the more she dug, the more the inconsistencies stood out. Still here, Philippe's voice startled her. Anthony's older brother stood at the door, his commanding presence as imposing as ever. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the brother's resemblance was clearer, the same green eyes, the same strong build. But where Anthony radiated warmth, Philippe exuded a calculating coolness. Just finishing some analysis, she said, hastily closing the files on her computer. Philippe smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Dedicated. Now I see why Anthony insisted on bringing you into the company. Once he was gone, Emily realized her hands were shaking. Something about Philippe's tone suggested a veiled threat she couldn't quite put her finger on. The silence in the empty office now felt oppressive. The next morning, as she ate breakfast at Anthony's apartment, Emily barely touched her food. Sunlight streamed in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating golden patterns on the glass table where her croissant lay untouched. "Is something wrong?" he asked, watching her over his cup of coffee. Emily hesitated. How could she tell him about her suspicions without sounding like she was stirring trouble? And what if she was wrong? This could destroy not only the company, but the entire family. "It's just work," she said vaguely. "Still getting used to it." Anthony nodded, though she could tell he wasn't convinced. Lately, there had been an invisible distance between them, built from half-truths and things left unsaid. The weight of secrets was starting to take its toll. 5 years earlier, the office was dimly lit by the fading evening light when the argument erupted. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," Philippe shouted, his face red with rage. "Dad expects me to be perfect, never to slip up." Anthony watched his brother pace back and forth, a half-empty whiskey bottle on his desk. The smell of liquor mingled with the leather of the expensive furniture. "Phil, if you need help—" "I don't need your help," Philippe cut him off. "I need you to stop being the perfect son everyone loves, while I carry the company on my back." Back then, Anthony blamed the outburst on stress and alcohol. Now, those words took on a different meaning. In the present, Emily spent the weekend discreetly investigating. Each new discovery made her stomach sink. These weren't just discrepancies, they were clear signs of embezzlement. carefully obscured by a web of shell companies. In her small apartment, which she rarely used now but kept as a refuge, she spread printed documents across the kitchen table. Emma found her that way upon arriving from a night shift. "So you look like you've seen a ghost," her friend remarked, setting her bag on the counter. "Sometimes," Emily replied without looking up. "It's better not to see certain things." Monday morning, Anthony had a board meeting. Emily watched him through the glass walls, noticing how tense he appeared as Philippe presented the quarterly figures. "Our results are outstanding," Philippe declared confidently. "The historic district project is progressing on budget." Emily's heart tightened. She knew it was all a lie. Each of Philippe's words now carried new meaning, each gesture of confidence hiding an elaborate deception. After the meeting, Anthony found her in the building's cafe. It was almost empty at that time, just a few hurried executives grabbing coffee to go. "Something's off," he said bluntly. "The board's pushing for decisions that make no sense. It's like—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Anthony," Emily took a deep breath. It was now or never. "I need to show you something." In her office, she opened the files she'd compiled over the weekend. As each discrepancy was revealed, Anthony's face grew paler. Their coffees grew cold, forgotten on the desk. "This can't be real," he muttered, though his eyes suggested he already suspected the truth. "There's more," she added gently. "I traced the shell companies. They all lead to a holding in the Cayman Islands, registered 5 years ago. Around the time Phil started drinking heavily," Anthony said, closing his eyes. When he started talking about pressure and expectations, memories flooded his mind. 3 years earlier, Philippe's office smelled of new leather and success. That day, a particularly thick file lay on his desk. "What do you mean by questionable?" Anthony asked, watching his brother sign a stack of documents. "Just trust me," Philippe responded without looking up. "Sometimes we have to make tough choices for the greater good of the company." "Phil, don't be naive, Anthony. The world isn't black and white like you think." 1 year earlier, the Lefebvre Mansion's library was dimly lit by a single lamp at the writing desk, where Bernard Lefebvre read over documents with growing concern. "These reports don't add up," his father said, frowning at the paperwork. "I'll take care of it, Dad," Philippe offered quickly. "You need to rest and your blood pressure." Bernard Lefebvre hesitated, then nodded wearily. "Where would we be without you, son?" "How much?" Anthony asked, his voice rough. "Millions," Emily answered quietly. "Over the years, he's diverted." "No," Anthony cut her off. "How long have you known about this?" "I found out on Friday," she admitted. "I wanted to be sure before 3 days," he said, getting up abruptly. "You kept this from me for 3 days. Anthony, I trusted you," he said, pain evident in his voice. "I brought you into the company, into the family. That's why I had to be certain," she argued. "I couldn't just throw accusations around without proof." "He's your brother." Anthony closed his eyes, tears forming. "What do I do? If this comes out, it'll destroy our family. It'll kill our mother." "We have to think carefully," Emily said gently, touching his arm. "Maybe there's a way to fix this internally and without—" The office door flew open. Philippe stood there, his face a mask of controlled anger. "So," he said in a dangerously soft voice, "the meddling waitress has finally shown her true colors." "Phil," Anthony said, instinctively placing himself between his brother and Emily. "We can talk about this." "Talk?" Philippe gave a hollow laugh. "About how I sacrificed everything to keep this company afloat while you played the rebel. How Dad pinned all his hopes on you while I had to settle for scraps of approval. That doesn't justify—" "Don't lecture me," Philippe roared. "You have no idea what it's like to carry this family legacy, and now you're letting this opportunist ruin everything we built." The tension in the office was palpable. Emily's heart pounded so hard she was sure the others could hear it. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," she interjected, her voice shaky but resolute. "I just can't ignore—" "Of course not," Philippe sneered. "Because you're so perfect, right? The honest waitress who captured the prince's heart. Well, newsflashy, sweetheart, this isn't a fairy tale." "Enough, Phil," Anthony said firmly. "We can handle this as a family." "Family?" Philippe stepped closer, his gaze drilling into Emily. "She isn't family. Now I have to decide how to handle this inconvenience. The air thickened with implied threat. Anthony's heart pounded, torn between love for his brother and the need to protect Emily. If anything happens to her, Anthony said quietly, each word heavy with meaning, I'll expose everything myself. The brothers glared at each other. Years of love, rivalry, and resentment crystallized into one moment of pure conflict. So you're choosing her, Philippe said at last. Choosing a stranger over your own blood. In that moment, something shifted in Anthony's expression. A new determination mingled with deep sadness. No, Phil, he murmured. I'm not choosing sides. I'm choosing what's right. And deep down, you know this can't go on. That change in tone caught Philippe off guard. For a moment, the anger in his eyes wavered, revealing a more vulnerable emotion beneath. You don't understand, he said, voice cracking slightly. You never did. Then make me understand, Anthony insisted, stepping closer. We're brothers, Phil. Before we were executives, before anything, we were family. Emily stood by, heart aching at the pain she saw on both men's faces. It was like watching something break and start to mend at the same time. It started small, Philippe said, collapsing into a chair. At first, it was little adjustments to cover some losses. Then it got easier and easier. Why? Anthony asked gently. You've always been brilliant at numbers, at business. Because it was never enough, Philippe exclaimed, anguish overshadowing anger now. No matter how hard I worked, Dad always looked at you with that pride, that expectation. Phil. And you didn't want any of it, Philippa continued bitterly. All that anticipation, all that potential. You just turned your back. And I stayed, trying to fill a space that was never really mine. The silence that followed was loaded with decades of unspoken comparisons, frustrations, and unvoiced rivalries mixed with love. Emily was the one who finally broke the silence, her voice quiet but firm. There's still time, she said. Time to fix this, to do the right thing. Philippe turned to her, really seeing her for the first time, minus the mask of scorn and anger. How? He asked, his voice rife with a vulnerability that made Emily's heart ache. The money. A big chunk of it is gone. Then we start there, Anthony said, sitting next to his brother. We'll trace every cent, figure out a plan to return it, to make amends. The board doesn't need all the details, Anthony insisted. We can treat it like a financial reorganization, a strategic realignment. Emily watched the two brothers as they began to strategize together, applying their combined experience in business, not in opposition, but in tandem. It was like witnessing a complex dance, where each misstep could spell disaster, but each correct move led them closer to salvation. Hours passed. Night had fallen long ago, and the city lights sparkled like a sea of stars beyond the office windows. Papers piled up on the table, spreadsheets were revised, plans drafted. It'll take time, Philippe finally said, rubbing his weary eyes. Years, maybe. We have time, Anthony replied, and we have each other. Just then, Marie entered the office, surprising them all. I knew I'd find you here, she said, looking from one brother to the other. Mom's worried. None of you showed up for dinner. A tense moment passed as the brothers exchanged glances. Then Philippe spoke up. Marie, we need to talk. As a family. Marie's expression softened, as though she'd been anticipating this moment. I always suspected something was off, she admitted quietly, shutting the door behind her. All those tense silences, whispered arguments. Phil, you're my brother. You should have trusted us. Philippe bowed his head. The burden of years of secrets finally too great. I didn't know how. Each day that passed made it harder. But now you do, Anthony completed, placing a hand on his brother's shoulder. You're not alone anymore. Marie stepped closer, her heels echoing in the office stillness. Wordlessly, she wrapped her arms around Philippe, and Anthony joined them. Emily watched with tears in her eyes, three siblings reconciling, facing a storm together. How are we going to tell Mom? Marie asked after a while. With the truth, Philippe answered, his voice steadier now. She deserves that, and I need to do it right this time. They had the conversation with Hélène Lefebvre in the mansion's library the following night. The sense of old books and memories filled the space as Philippe confessed his mistakes, with Anthony and Marie by his side. Hélène listened in silence, her hands wringing a silk handkerchief. When he finished, she rose slowly and walked to the window, gazing out over the gardens where her children had once played. "Your father," she began softly, "always said the true strength of a man isn't in never falling, but in how many times he can stand back up." Turning to face her children, she added, "And now, Phil, you're finally standing." The days that followed were intense. Anthony and Philippe worked tirelessly on a restructuring plan that would allow them to repay the diverted funds without publicly scandalizing the family. Marie used her legal contacts to ensure everything was handled properly. Emily found her own role in the process, using her outside perspective to challenge assumptions and offer solutions that lifelong corporate insiders sometimes missed. One night, while they were reviewing documents in Anthony's office, Philippe turned to Emily. "I misjudged you," he admitted. "I thought you were a threat to the family, but you helped bring us closer together." Emily gave a small smile. "Sometimes it takes an outsider to make us see what's been right in front of us." Anthony watched the exchange with a blend of pride and relief. Despite the turmoil, something new was forming. A stronger, more honest family bound together by mutual forgiveness. The sun rose over the city, painting the sky pink and gold. It was a new day, literally and metaphorically. In the offices of Lefebvre Holdings, 3 siblings and a former waitress turned essential part of the team continued their work, knowing the road ahead would be long and arduous. But now they had something they'd lost along the way: each other, honesty, and most importantly, hope. Philippe gazed out the window, watching the city wake up. "Dad would be proud," he said softly, "not of my mistakes, but of how we're handling them." "He was always proud," Anthony replied. "Some of us just took longer to realize it." Emily entwined her fingers with Anthony's, feeling the weight and lightness of the moment. Sometimes, she thought, the biggest secrets lead to the greatest truths, and sometimes the darkest shadows only serve to show how brightly the light can shine. The 30th floor boardroom had a different aura that morning. Where tension and secrets once dominated, there was now a sense of renewed purpose. Emily watched as Anthony led a presentation on new corporate transparency policies. "Lefebvre Holdings has always stood for excellence," he declared, voice steady and clear. "Now, we want it to stand for integrity, too." Philippe, seated on Anthony's right, nodded in agreement. The past few weeks had transformed him. Freed from his secrets, he appeared lighter, more genuine. "Our new audit protocols," Philippe added, "will ensure every transaction is transparent and traceable. We can't change the past, but we can build a better future." Emily couldn't help but smile. Philippe's words echoed the late-night conversations they'd had while outlining the restructuring plan. He had become an unexpectedly strong ally in the mission to overhaul the company's culture. After the meeting, as the executives dispersed, Marie approached Emily. "You do realize you changed everything, don't you?" she said, linking arms with her. "Not just the company, but our entire family." Emily blushed. "I only did what I thought was right. And that's precisely why you belong here," Marie smiled. "We needed that fresh perspective, someone who sees beyond the conventions of our world." Marie's comment touched on something Emily had come to realize in recent weeks. Her background at Billionaire Cafe, once seeming like a disadvantage, had proven to be her greatest asset. She understood people in a way top business school graduates sometimes didn't. At lunchtime, Anthony found her in her office. "I have a surprise for you," he announced with a mischievous grin. "Anthony, we have that investor meeting in an hour," she began. "It can wait," he said, taking her hand. "Come with me." To her astonishment, he led her out of the building, across the street, and into Billionaire Cafe. Marcus greeted them with a conspiratorial smile. "Your table's ready," he said, ushering them to a private corner. "Our table," Emily said softly, recognizing where they'd first sat down together after the wedding event. "You planned this." "Guilty," Anthony admitted, pulling out her chair. I thought we deserved a moment to breathe and remember how it all started. Sophie appeared with 2 cups of coffee, prepared exactly how they liked them. For old time's sake, she said with a wink. Sitting there in the cafe where everything had truly begun, Emily felt a wave of nostalgia. Feels like another life, she remarked. Me, serving tables. You, pretending to be just a regular customer. I never pretended with you, Anthony said quietly. Here was the one place I could really be myself. The familiar chatter of customers, the hum of the coffee machine, the smell of fresh bread. It all carried her back to a time that felt both distant and profoundly part of who she was. Sometimes I miss it, she admitted. The simplicity, you know? We can have simplicity, Anthony reassured her, taking her hand across the table. Even in the middle of all the complexity our lives have now, it's about remembering what really matters. After lunch, they decided to go for a short walk before returning to work. Their steps led them naturally to the Park of Lights, where months ago Anthony had revealed his true identity. The park looked especially lovely that spring afternoon. Trees swayed in a gentle breeze, and the sound of water splashing in the central fountain provided a soothing soundtrack. Remember the last time we were here? Anthony asked as they strolled. How could I forget? It's when you turned my world upside down, she teased, though her tone was affectionate. They arrived at the same bench under the willow tree where they'd had that crucial conversation. Anthony stopped, turning to face her. This place, he began, suddenly serious, means so much to us. Here, I finally told you who I was. Here, our story really began, with all its twists and challenges. Emily felt her pulse quicken. There was an intensity in his eyes she recognized. And now, he went on, letting go of her hand to reach into his pocket. I want this to be the place where we start a new chapter. When he knelt, Emily felt time freeze. The ring in his hand was simple and elegant, not the flashy kind one might expect from a Lefebvre, but something that perfectly reflected who they were together. Emily Carter, Anthony said, flashing that crooked smile that had first enchanted her in the conservatory. You showed me that true wealth isn't about bank accounts or family names. You brought honesty, courage, and love not just into my life, but into my entire family. You make me want to be a better person every day. Tears welled in her eyes as he continued. I'm not asking you to enter my world, because we've created a new one together, a better one. I'm asking you to keep building that world with me. Emily, will you marry me? For a moment, she just looked at him, this man who had upended her world and then helped her find her balance, the man who never asked her to change, only to be more genuinely herself. Yes, she answered, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, of course. As he slid the ring onto her finger, she noticed a small inscription inside. Upon closer look, she recognized the words, "For my conservatory dancer." Applause startled them. Turning around, they saw the entire Lefebvre family emerging from behind the trees, Marie bouncing with excitement, Philippe smiling broadly, Elaine with tears in her eyes. And utterly to Emily's utter surprise, Emma, Sophie, and Marcus were all there too. You planned all this? She accused Anthony, laughing. Guilty again, he chuckled. But this time I had plenty of accomplices. Once a Lefebvre, always a Lefebvre, Marie quipped, hugging Emily. Welcome to the family. Officially, although you've been part of it for a long time now. Philippe was next to approach, embracing her warmly in a way that would have been unthinkable just a few months before. Thank you, he whispered, for saving not just my brother, but all of us. As family and friends crowded around them with congratulations and hugs, Emily looked at Anthony, her fiancé. The word was new and thrilling in her mind. He gazed back at her with so much love it made her heart feel like it might burst. The afternoon wore on, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. Their small impromptu celebration continued, with champagne corks popping, Marie thought of everything, and laughter echoing through the park. It was a new beginning, yes, but also a continuation of a story that began with a secret dance in a conservatory that survived revelations, secrets, and storms, and that now opened onto infinite possibilities. Emma approached Emily, offering her 2 glasses of champagne. So, she said with a smile, it's not every day a waitress becomes a Lefebvre, right? Emily took the glass, laughing. No, she corrected, looking fondly at the blended group, Lefebvre family mingling with her friends from the cafe, everyone chatting and laughing together. It's not every day two families become one. The sun dipped below the horizon at the Park of Lights, its final rays reflecting off the new ring on her finger. Soon they'd have to return to reality, to meetings, obligations, and challenges. But for now, in this perfect moment, all that mattered was the love they'd built and the future that awaited them.